And I said, I don't have a whole lot more to live for. And if I die, it's okay. And I started noticing that thought would come through more and more. It's okay if I die. I didn't have that real desire to do a whole other phase. I didn't have a big desire for making something of my life. And that's when I realized that the loss was so much deeper than I had thought.
Welcome to Zestful Aging, where I interview inspiring and influential guests who are making their mark on the world and contributing to the common good. Contributing to the common good in even the smallest of ways is one of the scientifically proven ways we can age with vitality and deep contentment. I'm your host, Nicole Christina, psychotherapist and fellow Zestful Ager. My goal is to share optimism about aging and introduce you to guests who will excite and inspire you to share your own gifts and talents with the world. And to find out more about this podcast, my web courses, and my book, Not Just Chatting, How to Become a Master Podcast Interviewer, hop on over to zestfulaging.com. And while you're there, sign up for my monthly email newsletter, The Insider, where you will get behind the scenes looks at my interviews and other fun tidbits, including what's new at my Etsy shop, Zestful Design. Ever wonder what the host of Zestful Aging does when she's not podcasting? Creating one-of-a-kind earrings, of course. I've just opened an Etsy shop called Zestful Design, no S, and it showcases my fun, comfortable, and zesty polymer earrings. These earrings are fun to make and fun to wear. So check out my new shop, Zestful Design, on Etsy. Our music is courtesy of Judy Banker. Find out more at judybanker.com. We have a wonderful interview for you today. Once we've arrived at middle age, life has presented us with our share of challenges. Some of these challenges can be monumental. So how do we navigate the very real losses and rebound? As she entered the third phase of life, Dami Roelse lost her life partner. Her solution, a long walk in the Himalayas to escape the reality of life without her best friend. This trek in a desolate wilderness at high altitude gave her back her sense of belonging. And since then, Dami uses long-distance hiking and backpacking as a means to deepen her connection with nature and the universe. Welcome to the show, Dami.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Nicole.
I'm really excited to get into all of your adventures. Let's start with kind of a big question, and that is, what is zestful aging to you? What does that mean to you?
Well, to me, it means, zest. When you put a little bit of zest in your cooking, it's that subtle flavor. And, but it makes you pay attention. There is something that, to me, it jumps up in me. So when I'm living with zest, there are these moments, where I feel like I sort of jump up. I pay attention. Something pops out at me. And that could be because I am attentive in the moment, but it could also be because I'm willing to explore new things, and I'm always kind of on the lookout for, what's on the horizon. And as you mentioned about my walking, I think from very young on, I've always been curious about what's on the other side there. What is, further down on the horizon. And so for me, it's not zestful aging. It's been zestful living all my life. I have looked for that little oomph that keeps you going, and it gives you energy to do whatever you need to do to move forward.
And you have to be paying attention for that. You can't be looking down on your phone.
No. Well, unless you're paying attention to what's on your phone. You might
That's
discover
right, like
something.
the map you need. That's right. Were you always like this as a kid? I mean, is your family like this as well, or is this something individual to you?
I think I come from a fairly curious family. My father I'm taking after my father, who was always off on some adventure, and we never knew when he would return, if he went for a walk, because he would just follow his nose on something that was interesting and then show back up 2 hours later, to the frustration of my mother. So I think I have some of
imagine.
that.
Uh-huh.
And
so you knew that was something that could be interesting and exciting.
yeah, and he also was the one who introduced us to, getting up really early in the morning and walking in the dunes, because I lived on an island in Holland, before anybody else was up. He was somebody who would seek out the edges of things that have a certain excitement, not necessarily danger, but certain excitement. And I think I take after him in that regard.
So you've always been a person who appreciates the outdoors, appreciates the walking, and then your partner, your husband, died.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
How did that change things?
Well, he didn't just die. It was a very long, slow process. And he was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and it was another 12 years before he died. So that's a long period in our life and my life of this slow trajectory towards disability. And we took it as something that in the beginning, he was an adventurer also. It's like, we're going to beat this thing. We can do this. And the sad thing is, there is no cure for Parkinson's. And even though we, not at this point, even though we tried everything alternative and everything, that was conventional, his decline was ongoing. So, it wasn't a sudden change. And I think that's really the crux of my memoir, when I talk about you don't even know that the loss is there because it's so gradual. Mm-hmm. And you can't really grieve because the person is still there, but he's no longer the person that he was. And in his case, Parkinson's dementia set in, and he became and this is in our world with a lot of people having to deal with Alzheimer's and dementia, an issue, I think, that is often not looked at. The person doesn't really, interact with you anymore as a partner, as an equal. And they're interacting with their illness or their lack of cognition. And so in my case, it was both the illness and the lack of cognition that really changed our relationship. And so
you became the main caregiver?
Well, I tried. And I was for a long time. There was also an awareness, I think, on his side that made him make decisions that were, in many people's eyes, foolish, which I also thought were a certain, reaching for survival. He wanted to do just whatever he felt like doing. He became very impulsive as a result of the medications, which, they don't tell you these side effects of the medications that he had to take to function. And he became very addicted to them and took way more than he should have. And so he became a very different person that I didn't recognize anymore. And so we lived separately, and he didn't want me to care for him. And he hired other people to look after him. And
it sounds complicated emotionally.
It is emotionally very complicated. I call them the gray years in a disease, in a long, slow decline, when you think the person can still think and act normal, but they really aren't. And you can also not diagnose them as incompetent. And so they can make all kinds of decisions that that can be harmful. So that was the hardest part. And during that time is when I just had to figure out what was going on, and I went for my walk in the Himalayas. That was the first long trek that I did on my own.
Was that a hard decision for you to make, to leave the country and to go, was it Nepal?
I went to Ladakh. It's in the north of India on the border with China and to the west of Nepal. It wasn't. It took a while, obviously, to sort of emerge in my consciousness as something I wanted to do. But I had contact, or I had a friend who had been there several times. And not too long before that, I'd seen, she had done a slideshow for people, and I saw the pictures. And I think that is what really pulled on me again, because I had been in the Himalayas before in my 20s. So it wasn't a totally foreign place. It was actually a place where I had some really good experiences. So it was sort of a going back to something that was good. But when I saw the barrenness of the mountains, that just sort of matched the barrenness I was starting to feel inside me, or that I felt inside me. And I just wanted to get lost there. And that's what, And this friend was helped me with contacts over there. So it was actually not that difficult. A lot of people say, wow, you go all the way to some place like that. No, I feel like in a way I was guided. I had a contact when I arrived. I had a place to stay. And
it fit into place. Everything fell into place. And
that contact was going to be a guide on the trek, which didn't quite turn out that way, but his nephew ended up. So I felt taken care of in that sense. You know, I wasn't just off in nowhere land. It was nowhere land, but I'm an experienced traveler. I traveled around the world in my 20s a lot. So it to me, it's not as daunting as it would be to most other people, probably.
So what happened on that trek in the barrenness?
Oh, so much happened. I was able to actually get a 6-week sabbatical from my job, and because I was seeing a therapist at the time to deal with my issues. And he actually advised, because to give me family or sick leave, it had to be, you know, someone had to vouch for me needing this. And he advised that I would do this. So I was very lucky. I got to leave my job to do that. So what happened there, I started, you know, it became, I had a mission, which was often with these things a fabricated mission, because my friend had been in this area several times, and she had gathered and raised money for a nunnery to be built in this village that is 4 days walking in the roadless area. And she said, well, if you go and you're going to do this trek, which she had done before, you can bring back, report to me how the nunnery, what it's like, bring back the pictures, and because she hadn't seen it finished. So that was my mission. To go to this village.
To report.
And report
on
back.
The progress.
Yeah. Yes. So that kind of, when you have a mission on a long trek, if you have a goal, I'm going to do this to reach this, it helps you when things get difficult, or, you know, you ask less often, what am I doing here, or why am I doing this?
You have a reason.
It pulls you through. Yeah.
So can you describe, for those of us who have not been on a trek, what is it actually like? Are you are you having a sort of scramble up steep parts, or, you know, like, what actually is it like to walk on this trek?
Yeah, well, we can call it hiking. Because the difference between walking and hiking, I always say, is that hiking is on uneven terrain, ups and downs where, your balance is much more a part of the whole thing. Whereas walking is not always on flat ground, but more, I see it's on paved ground and not near as challenging. It can be challenging if it's a steep incline, but other than that, the pavement is, you're not stepping over roots or tripping over rocks or having to cross little or big waters. Sometimes it's little creeks, sometimes it's big rivers, as we had to do here. And trekking in the Himalayas, the wonderful thing about it is that it's a tourist industry, especially you've heard about Nepal. So there are many agencies who provide guides. They provide mules or small mountain horses to carry all the stuff that you need. So you really, unlike backpacking here in the U.S., over there you really just need to carry a backpack, a day pack, to, maybe some food in it and your camera and an extra jacket and stuff like that. But you have, an entourage of people who take care of you while you're doing that. So you're not alone, even though I went on this trek alone. I didn't stay alone. I met somebody, but, you go out. And in that sense, once you get to the trail in these countries, it's very much like in high countries here, like in the Sierras or in Washington or in the Catskills. There's a trail, and the trail can be very rough, and it climbs and it descends, and there are obviously here we are in the mountains, gorges. There are glacial rivers that come down, and the real challenge of trekking in Ladakh and in Nepal is the altitude. You have to be acclimated to altitude. And for folks who live at sea level or at lower elevations, that can be a real challenge. And you just take your hiking sticks and you put on your pack, and hopefully you have the right gear on your body to, deal with the elements, and you start walking. And other than that, it's, I don't even know at that time, because my gear was still very primitive. It's evolved over time. I didn't really keep track of how many miles I walked in a day, but we walked every day. And, we started in the morning after breakfast, and then we had lunch at some point, and we walked until 4:00 in the afternoon, sometimes 3, and then we put up, we set up camp somewhere. And the guy knew the places where he wanted to do that, where there was water nearby and, things like that.
Hi, listeners. I wanted to introduce you to a podcast that I think you will love. It's called Out There. Here's the trailer, and in one of the new episodes, you will hear yours truly talk about a healing walk through the woods. Enjoy.
Hi, I'm Willow Belden, the host of Out There podcast. Over the past almost 7 years, we've been bringing you outdoor stories that help you make sense out of your life and your world. This February, we're launching a new season.
Hello! That's so a bear doesn't get me.
That's Sarah Deely. Growing up, Sarah was not outdoorsy, and she was not athletic.
Once I had to write an apology note to my phys ed teacher because instead of trying to hit the softball that was pitched to me, I screamed and ran away every time.
But at age 20, during a terrible bout of depression, she enrolled in a wilderness therapy program. By the end of the program, Sarah was ready to embrace nature. She didn't want to be an indoor kid anymore. Instead, she envisioned a new version of herself, a rugged outdoors woman.
I could see her so clearly. She was about 70 pounds thinner than me, a tan mountain climber with ripped calves and a well-trained dog. She was someone who had her life together, and that life was wild. She was beautiful.
But when Sarah got back to the real world, she didn't end up becoming that outdoor girl. Turns out, changing who you are isn't that simple. Sarah's story is one of many we'll be sharing with you this season. The episodes will all be the kind of personal, introspective narratives you know and love. But there will be a common theme. The theme is things I thought I knew. Each episode will share a story about an outdoor experience that changed someone's understanding. In some cases, the storytellers gain new understanding about themselves.
I don't have to define myself by negation, saying I'm this, not that.
In some stories, our guests discover new truths about how to rise to the challenges in their lives.
I really felt like, I was this princess. I felt beautiful. And that's not a thing I feel often as a Black woman.
And in one case, we have a storyteller who figures out a new way to do good in the world by tackling a difficult history head on.
If national parks are America's best idea, and there are deep, painful injustices embedded in their creation, what does that say about America?
To hear all of these stories and many more, follow us on your podcast platform of choice. The season begins February 3rd and we'll be releasing new episodes every 2 weeks after that through the middle of May. You can find Out There wherever you get your podcasts and at outtherepodcast.com.
Now back to the show. What's the wildlife like?
So in this area, there was very little wildlife in the sense of there are no bears, or there are some wild yak, and we encountered those, but they're not. Although I witnessed a yak fight of two yaks with each other, and I was really close. And I went, whoa, that raised the hair
They're
on the
big
back
animals.
of mine. They're big
Yeah.
animals, and I don't want to be between those two, but. But they're not coming after people necessarily. So I have in one of my chapters, I describe, just at a very early in the morning, I was up before my guide was up, and so they weren't cooking breakfast yet. So I was just wandering around, and there were all these marmots. So marmots live in the high country and coming out of their holes and talking to each other. And so, but they're not dangerous to people. So very little wildlife in the sense that you have to be afraid of. Yeah.
Were you mostly silent when you were walking?
I met somebody as we started on this trek. So I had actually on the way out to this village, and this makes the whole story so much more interesting. Of all people, I met we took a bus out to the end of the road from where we started walking, and that was a whole day's affair. And at the bus stop, I met a man who I detected real quickly that he was from my native country, that he was Dutch, because he had the unmistakable accent in his English when he asked, where he could get a ticket for the bus to where we were going. And so we ended up trekking together. So I had somebody I could talk with during the day, because my guide and the horseman, my guide cook, it was a combination, turned up. His English was limited. So, we could talk about, are you hungry and how's the food and sleeping? But there were no conversations about life or, what is this all about? But the man that I met, whom I've changed his name in the book, called Wouter, he and I had lots of conversations because he was there for a very interesting reason as well. And so, it was, for him, it was a spiritual quest. And so we had a lot of talks about spirituality and gurus and, why he was doing this. And so, that's, but, there's also plenty of times where you're silent, obviously, which is something I actually prefer most of the time. In all my hiking and backpacking, I've done a lot of solo backpacking. The being with the environment is what changes you. When you feel yourself, and there the mountains, they would go up 3,000 feet, just straight up around you, and you feel so small, and you start to really think about the big questions in life. What is this all about, and what are people doing here? And I try to address some of that in my memoir as well. And it translates as you are making so much effort with your body, because the biggest thing I think that I learned there, what I experienced, which I didn't remember from my first trek in my 20s, I trekked to base camp Mount Everest, but I don't remember that kind of insight. It really came much later in my life. That was just an adventure. But this time I really felt the depth, that each breath was life, and it's your breath goes into your boots almost. And when you get up to 16,000 feet, I was climbing over a pass at 16,000 feet. You're slow, and all you are is your lungs, and then this just amazing landscape around you that is so powerful. It really puts you in the present, is what they always say. When you're at high altitude, because you have a lack of oxygen, you're so focused on making it breath, step. That's all there is. It's a total meditation, and yeah. So that's what really brought me in touch with what I was made of. I found out how strong I was, and I didn't know that before. And fear that I had to overcome is I had to cross some rivers. And my cook guide, he was 19. He had no clue what it was like for me in my late 50s, because I was in my late 50s then, because that was just normal life for him. So he didn't have a real understanding of how difficult it could be. My contact in Leh, Karma, with whom I trekked again 2 years ago, I went back, he has a much better understanding of that. But for some reason, that didn't work out. And in a way, that sort of being cut off, being just totally left to my own devices to figure this out, I see now as a blessing, and I figured it out. Who am I? Where do I stand? What is important in my life? And I came back with some answers, to talk to my husband at the time.
So it really helped clarify.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I had felt so disjointed, losing a relationship that I didn't fully lose. And so I had to kind of learn to determine again, who am I? Where do I stand? And what am I willing to give here? And what can I give here? And that really helped in the next 5 years, because it was another 5 years before he passed, in taking care of myself, not losing myself as a caregiver, and also continue to love him for what he was, without expecting anything in return anymore. Yeah.
A real acceptance of what was.
That's right.
Not what you wish.
Yeah. But if we go back to, zest and zestful living, it wasn't until a few years after he passed, and I found myself saying, I was reaching probably was like, how old was I then? Close to 65. I said, I've had a good life. And I had really had to think, people die, and how long am I going to live? Those questions go through you. And I thought, I've had a good life. I've done some really marvelous and wonderful things. I had a great career as a mental health therapist. I had done meaningful work. My children were doing fine. They were all successful, adults, married, graduated from college. It was wonderful. And I said, I don't have a whole lot more to live for. And if I die, it's okay. And I started noticing that thought would come through more and more. It's okay if I die. I didn't have that real desire to do a whole other phase. Or I didn't have a big desire for making something of my life. And that's when I realized that the loss was so much deeper than I had thought.
I see.
Yeah. And I have to tell you, I think I lost my zest for life, for living at that time. But I then started, after I've been in the Himalayas and I'd been in Europe and I had hiked in so many places, I said, for my 65th birthday, I want to hike the state of Oregon, where I have lived now for so long, because I don't really know it here. And that's when I started hiking the Pacific Crest Trail. Mm-hmm. And I did most of Oregon that summer. I was still working, so I didn't have a really long, but I had 3 weeks to get most of it done. And that's when I really discovered that sort of zest again of being connected to this incredible beauty and walking daily and what that can do for me. And so I didn't immediately say I'm going to hike the whole PCT, but I really understood how beneficial being on the trail for periods of time was versus, a walk or a day hike. I really discovered the long distance hiking and
a very different kind of hike.
Very different from what happened in the Himalayas, even though, I was not dealing at that time with really high altitude, but some altitude. But yeah, self-sufficiency. You carry everything on your back. So it's a very simple living and learning to go without and being, being able to solve problems. It's not a difficult trail to follow, but, sometimes you might take a wrong turn, but that's not usually the case. And it's, as some people say, it's a highway. There's so many people on it all the time. So you're not like lonely. You see people regularly, except during COVID. You didn't see people, but in general, it's not a lonely journey. So yeah, that's when I started doing it. And I'm almost finished. So I'm now 74 and I would have finished if it hadn't been for the fires this last summer. But I have a stretch to do from Tahoe to Yosemite. And I've hiked every other mile.
And is that, you do that yourself or you do that with a group?
No, I do it myself or with someone who's willing to go with me. I've met people on the way, and I've had hiking buddies. I've also trained a few other women because as I was doing so much backpacking, I thought, there were other women who said, "Oh, I really want to do this." So I started, teaching a class on backpacking after year 50, just how you do it, what to do, what you need, and that became my book, Walking Gone Wild. Rather than teaching classes, it was more efficient to just create a book and let people read it. But I also trained some people locally here that went with me. So we hiked, a couple of 100 miles in Washington and some here in Oregon. And some of them have gone on to finish and others say, that was enough, 100 miles, that's enough for me. But letting people discover it. Yeah. So that was a period in which that's very satisfying as well. I've reduced that now to just encouraging other women to take up walking on a regular basis rather than taking women onto the long trail. But in these groups on Facebook that I have several, people ask and I meet people. So I met someone last year who said, "Can I come with you on one of your long stretches?" And we did a whole long stretch together in Southern California, and it worked out wonderfully between us. So you meet new people, which is the exciting thing about it. Yeah.
I bet. It sounds like there's so much more to it than just exercise and, I did the trail. It sounds like it might be hard to put into words how rich the experience is.
Yeah, I think it's life-changing, and both it's a spiritual experience, it's also a physical changing experience, and that's why I call my website Transformation Travel. It's a form of travel that really, truly transforms you on all levels. Mm-hmm. And studies show that going out one day for a hike, on how that affects your cognition, when you're not behind a screen all day or, stressful in a job. Then they looked at 3 days out, and then they looked at a week out. And the longer you go out, the better your brain is after you come back. Mm-hmm. And I have literally experienced this, that my vision improved, my memory that we tend to lose as we get older, was definitely improved, after 3 weeks or 4 weeks on the trail. And the other interesting thing because, I do a bone density test. So after 4 years of backpacking regularly with, almost a 30-pound pack, my bone density had increased rather than decreased at age 70.
Wow.
And I expect that, I'm due for one next year. I expect that to be similar, So there are physical changes that happen. And they've done studies that show that regular walking is an anti-aging agent. So, and that's why there's such enthusiasm that's coming now. My Facebook group, Walking Women 50 Plus, has now over 2,000 members. Women are walking.
Wow.
They figured it out because walking encourages the release of telomerase. The telomeres they lengthen the ends of your chromosome cell structure. So we have a chromosome cell structure, and as we're aging, they become shorter. But walking, this regular exercise, is not hard exercise, but regular exercise lengthens those telomeres. And so it slows down. I would say it's not like you become younger, but it slows down your aging process. And who wouldn't want that?
There's so many good things about being out in nature.
And there's
and
that.
the benefits of forest bathing type things.
Exactly.
Being with trees, with the fractals that are so good for our brain. And you talk a lot about that. You bring a lot of research into your book.
I do.
About why it's so beneficial. So, Dami, what would you say to someone listening saying, I haven't walked in a long time. I just, walk to the refrigerator to get my snacks while I'm watching my Netflix. It sounds interesting, but it also sounds kind of overwhelming. How would you suggest somebody start?
Yeah. Well, so my book, Walking on Wild, is a handbook for that. It starts with research and why in the world you would want to walk as you're, over 50. And it tells stories of other women who've started it. But it starts with start small. First, maybe, add some walking to your life. This is not about becoming someone who hikes the whole 2,650 miles of the Pacific Crest Trail. That's not the goal. Mm-hmm. That just happens to be my personal need, to do that. But that is not what you need to do. I tell people this over and over. To be healthy, to improve your cognition, you do not need to do the big stuff. You can just do the small stuff. And in my group, we encourage you in this Facebook group. People are so encouraging. I got a mile. I made it a mile to the, to the stores. People who have not, like you said, who've only been sitting in chairs and walking to the refrigerator. So I always say start with a little pedometer or some Fitbit and see how many steps you take in a day. Don't change anything. Start from there. And there's a site online you can, because we're calling it sitting disease. And, if you want to know if you have sitting disease, you can fill out this form and see how many hours in a day you sit. It's quite eye-opening for most people. And really the thing that we need more than anything is not distance walking. It's movement. So you probably have heard, to get up every half hour, we have these devices now that tells you time to get up. And they found, a woman actually found this out, she was with NASA doing, space research on what happened to bodies. What happened to when you're without gravity. It's the gravity that again affects your DNA, your cells. So getting up, engaging gravity is super important to slow down aging.
That's why I love the rebounder, the mini tramp, because that's exactly what it does.
That's what it does. But just getting up out of your chair, if you can do it without using your hands, by the way, use your quads to get up. That's what it starts with. Am I moving regularly throughout my day? If I'm doing a phone call, can I walk around the kitchen while I'm talking? Can I stand up for a while behind my computer? What can I change? Because a lot of people are still working and they have work situations in which doesn't allow them to move a whole lot. But, you can have a stand-up desk so that you move a little bit.
It's interesting as a therapist, because I know you were in that field. With COVID, it's all telehealth, so I don't have to get up anymore to bring people to the door. And you can just end up sitting one session after another because there's no one to greet at the door. They're all on your computer. So my fellow therapists have said too, this is not healthy, that it feels good even if you're just getting up, walking just a few, moments up the stairs.
Yes.
Every session is very different than just being stuck in your chair.
Yeah. And I say to people, park your car somewhere farther away, and walk that distance to the grocery store.
You said you had a really active Facebook group. Can you tell the name so our audience can take a look?
Sure. It's called Walking Women 50 Plus, and plus is spelled out. So Walking Women 50 Plus. So anybody over 50 can join.
Is 50 spelled out,
No,
Dami?
50 is numerical.
50. Yeah. No, 50 is the number and plus is spelled out.
Spelled out, yeah.
Walking Women 50 Plus, Plus, yeah.
And now people find me because I ask how they find this group, and they say, I just punched in walking and the group comes up, because it's one of the fewer groups that deal with women who want to walk. So
that's wonderful to have that support. And and of course you have written books, and people might want to know more about your story. Where can they find you?
So I have a website, transformation-travel.com. So transformation-travel.com.
Okay.
If they write my name, which is difficult, but it would come up under that too. There aren't too many Dami Roelses in the world. And so my books are available via my website. You can also find them on Amazon. And that's the memoir, Fly Free, and the walking book called Walking Gone Wild, How to Lose Your Age.
And it's won an award, I see.
Yep, it did.
That's wonderful. Dami, thank you so much for sharing your walking wisdom and life wisdom. I share your passion and your love. That's one of the reasons I think I have dogs in upstate New York. You cannot
Get a dog. Yep.
Not have dogs. And I was out this morning, and it was just this beautiful fall day. I have now a 6-month-old puppy, so she's eager. She's just sort of waiting for me to finish my coffee so we can go. And it was just such a spectacular way to start the day. The sun was coming through and the leaves were turning, and it was just, I felt really just filled up.
Yes.
And it's such a lovely way to start the day. And I just feel like I have much more to bring to my clients and anyone I interact with when I've had, it's such a beautiful experience. Simple, but also so wholesome. And, I have that good feeling of tiredness.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of hills where we go.
Those things. Yeah.
Sleep better, all that great stuff.
And you're contributing to a little bit of, reducing the pollution by walking instead of driving a car. And this car-centric society that we've created here in the U.S. And I grew up without a car in Europe. So for me, it wasn't such a big switch, but for people in U.S., it's a really big switch. And I'm sure there are people in other countries listening here who will agree that if you are in a country where there's public transportation, where people walk, then walking is enough course. But in the U.S., it's a big deal for people to decide to become walkers.
Yes. Absolutely. It's not made that way.
No.
Yeah, more and more, I think that's part of the plan as we all age. How is this going to look? Because after a while, even in a car-centric society, not everyone will be driving.
No.
So how do people get what they need?
And also that will help us ask for living in situations where there are sidewalks, where there are bicycle paths, that we move things in that direction. So this is an activity that is way more than just a healthy exercise activity. It has so many ramifications. So like you said, it fills up your soul. It changes your brain. It changes society. It is so far-reaching, and that's what's so wonderful about such a simple thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dami.
Well, you're very welcome. I'm glad I could share all this with you. And I'll just say to everybody, happy walking. It's for the better for all of us.
Thank you so much for joining us on Zestful Aging. If you like the podcast, please share it with some of your friends. I love to hear from my listeners. Send me an email at NicoleChristina.com. It's no secret that everyone's feeling pretty restless and unsettled right now. Our lives are upside down and the future is feeling pretty uncertain. But if you're anything like me, organizing my stuff can help me feel a little calmer. It's something I can do to help me feel a little more in control and in charge of my own life. If you think decluttering could help you feel better and you could use a little assistance with that, check out the online course I've developed with professional organizer and designer Carrie Luderin. It's called Too Much Stuff. And Too Much Stuff is different from other courses or articles or guidance you may have used up. We give you clear steps to deal with the clutter and the tools to help you face the overwhelming feelings and the emotions that come up when we're going through our clutter. And a lot of those emotions are just feeling anxious or guilty or just basically flooded with a lot of different confusing feelings. The course is really practical. It's realistic. The lessons are short and punchy, and they're really manageable. We're not trying to set you up for some long exploratory, super in-depth, burdensome experience. We want something really helpful for you right now. We all need help with our anxiety. So being surrounded by more calm and less chaos can really help. So now's a good time to clear out the clutter so we can focus on what's really important in our lives. So find out more at zestfulaging.com. You'll see more about this under the web courses tab. If you have any questions, just shoot me an email at zestfulaging@gmail.com. Thanks so much. And stay tuned next week for another interview with a fascinating and inspiring guest.